Generic yet polite salutations, folk. This is Trent Mayfair, coming to you from my hotel room in Memphis, because quite honestly, it's getting really cold at night, and there's only so much you can stay in a sleeping bag in that kind of weather. So, took a little trip up to Memphis, no big deal. Just really need to see the place, at least once, before I, pass by it. So, yeah. I spent most of last week in the French Quarter of Louisiana, and so I'm going to refuse to say anything more about that experience just for legal reasons. So, this past weekend, I went to Echoes of Athus, which was held at the same campsite as LARPworks Presents Mordavia. And so, with that being said, jumping right into it, the administration, they were kind of coordinated. Their primary GM was out of the area due to military service, and we all thank him for his service. But the rest of the storytellers seem to be scrabbling a bit to get everything out to the players. By Saturday, they all seem to be on the same page. Some of the storytellers were helpful, some of them weren't. There was an administrator or two on Friday night who kind of almost seemed not to care, and it was a little disconcerting. And I mean, there's always reasons. You had a bad day, you're sick, you have a lot on your mind because you're trying to get the story out and what have you. But there seems to be a certain lack of enthusiasm as well, like a certain lack of passion. They didn't really seem too keen on helping the new players fit in. They seem more intent on just their own stuff. They were really only attentive when it suited them or when they sensed that something was like super wrong. They seemed a lot more focused on themselves and what they were doing rather than bringing in experience to the players, as it were. Again, Friday night was much worse than Saturday. Saturday, there was definitely a lot of redemption on some of this stuff, but it still seemed to be lacking overall in regards to a professional LARP. Insofar as the rulebook, my initial read-through was that it was well organized, and yet they didn't seem to provide info in full. It was basically like a lot of link clicking to try and find basic information, and as a result of that, there was a disorganization within the organization. I can't really call it a good rulebook because I had so much difficulty finding such basic information. If they were to put out like a condensed version with just the pertinent, relevant information, here's basic weapon damage and how that works, here's the basic spell stuff, and like actually just put that all into one section, along with, hey, new players, here's what you should be bringing along with you and what to expect, that might go a very long way for them. The system in and of itself actually didn't promote all that much diversity within the character structure. At the lower levels, it absolutely works, but even then, at the lower levels, if you play this class, you have all the same stuff. The only classes that really had a lot of choice were the fighter classes, and even then, it was very obvious that you just take certain skills, and the other ones are just kind of useless. You might take them just to know them, but beyond that, as the levels get higher, even though they don't allow cross-classing, every single character class is going to see a homogeneity, and it's going to result in a very intense power gap. And so it's going to make it very difficult for the new players to feel useful. So moving on to the player-based discussion, in regards to open-mindedness, some are, some aren't. I actually found it rather difficult to gauge at this game because of the new player treatment. I mean, so on Friday night, we went into town via the newbie mod. And the newbie mod, in and of itself, they did a good job of demonstrating how skills work, demonstrating how combat works, giving us like a little bit of role play, not too much, but a little bit. Just kind of like jump in. And after the newbie mod, which was held like just off to the side of the tavern, and we walk into town, and we're basically dropped off in town, and there is a mod going on in the middle of town, but they are far away. Like, it was supposed to be like, they role played walking out of town for any number of miles of stuff like that, and they were just holding the mod in the middle of town. So after waiting and watching for around like 30 or 40 minutes, an NPC comes out of the tavern. Let me rephrase that. We, us newbies, smoked a couple of cigarettes. We basically joked amongst ourselves about finding an abandoned town and declaring it ours, writing out a deed for it, and naming it White Lobster just because it was a really nice little joke there. And we finally decided to go into the tavern. And at that point, we're met with an NPC, because we were going over to the tavern area and we were going to hang a flag, because, if you have a flag, then it's yours. And at that point, an NPC came out, told us that we couldn't do that, and basically tries to bring us out to the group mod that's going on. And when he learns that they're miles out of town and stuff like that, they basically like start pulling like retcons and hand wavium magic to basically have us meet and jump in with the group. The players and the storytellers basically ignored us, even when we offered suggestions on how to overcome the puzzles they were facing. But the storyteller would accept the idea when a veteran player offered the same idea. So it was rather disconcerting. It was a rather crappy experience, to say the least. And so while a couple of us were hanging out over by their tents, which were away from the main site, and honestly, the furthest away from the main site that I actually saw anybody really go, beyond like, one or two times, where we were already out there. But while we were out there basically bitching about the experience to each other, one of the storytellers came over and he basically like threw us a plot hook, and so we decided to take it. And he honestly, he bent over backwards to give us a good experience, and he really did save the game for the new players because all four of us were talking about leaving early and not coming back. Now, two of them were talking about coming back. I can't speak for the third one. His friend got sick, and so we had to drive him home. But yeah, like overall, it was really not the best new player experience, save for one storyteller who basically saved the game. In regards to the immersion level, um, the immersion level was barely there until like somebody took initiative to reinstate it, but it would drop off fairly quickly. I mean, people had cell phones out, they would just chat out game next to in-game intense roleplay without thought for the game or the people. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it struck me as very lax. When they were fully immersed, it was a lot of fun, but I didn't witness many of those instances. As, we got kind of excluded from the group, so it is what it is. The other aspect of the immersion was that there was very much a group mentality in this game. It was a very small population, and so everybody just kind of like followed the group. So basically, like if a leader stepped up and said, "We're doing this," that's basically what they did. And again, not a bad thing. Having a party leader is always a good thing. But when the party is the game, it's a little bit of a different dynamic to it. Um, so as a result, when you have people leading the way out of immersion in that kind of a group, other people tend to naturally follow until one person tries to bring them back in and then they follow, and it basically just becomes a cycle. Now, in regards to my overall experience, what I learned from observing the game is that not making use of the space that you have just breeds lazy habits that do a lot of damage to the game on multiple levels. Uh, when one of the new players called out the game for doing, faraway modules in the middle of town. One of the storyteller that he complained to basically like went up and to the other marshals and storytellers said, "Okay, no more mods in the center of town." He admitted that it was a habit that was bred out of laziness. And they owned up to it. They worked to fix the mistake, and that's a really good thing. But utilize the space that you have as much as you can. Um, that is definitely why I learned. It's a stage performance. Use the entire stage. What I learned from the players, unfortunately, was not too much. I mean, some were very nice but not too talkative or revealing about their issues with the game. Others were very standoffish, so I really didn't get much perspective from the players, so I really can't speak to that. What I learned from the GMs is that even a bad event can be saved if the focus is shifted back to the players and letting them explore the world and expand the story, even if they don't know what they're getting involved in. It's the aspect of story that will keep drawing players back. More and more, I'm realizing that even shitty rules, even a shitty player base, uh, can be saved by a good story. I'm very curious to see what happens given the storylines they threw out at me. Like I can totally forgive them for not having massive props and fizz reps or even basic ones, but the fact that they put out an intriguing story actually almost makes me want to explore things more. So, from that perspective, I can definitely see how a game can be saved as long as that focus and attention is given to the players and they are given the chance to explore and do what they want within the world, within reason, obviously. Like, if you got a medieval world, nobody's making a mech. I'm sorry, that's just not happening. Anyways, that's really all that I have for Echoes of Athos. So I do hope that you join me next weekend in Alabama, where I will be at the Dagger Here Winter War. I hope that this one's going to be an epic event. I might be a little bit shell shocked afterwards, so we will see what happens. Hope to see you there.